Hello and welcome to our webinar on handling incidents in LimaCharlie. For those of you that are new to LimaCharlie, we offer serverless endpoint detection and response. This includes EDR capability at any scale, telemetry storage, and search. Today we'll be walking through LimaCharlie's incident response pipeline and hunting platform. I'll be providing you with some best practices for how to effectively deal with an incident, and even show you some tips and tricks along the way. We'll start off by getting things set up for a brand new customer that you're handling an incident for. We'll perform an investigation and see some of the tools that you've got at your disposal. I'll then show you how to remediate and take action, either manually or automatically, and then we'll switch into monitoring mode. I'll be ending things off with a couple of opportunities that you can consider to provide even more value to your customers and in turn generate some additional revenue. So I'll start things off right inside the application. I'm going to make a couple of assumptions here that you've already gone and set up LimaCharlie before, and you're at least somewhat familiar with the interface. As a best practice, when getting started with a new customer, we recommend that you create a brand new organization for each one. It lets you keep things nice and neat and organized, and also give you some additional capabilities, like being able to choose the region that the customer is based in. So we offer a variety of different data centers that can become really important for compliance reasons, right? So if I've got a customer that's based in the US, they want to make sure that all of their data is housed and processed in the US and doesn't leave those geographic borders. This is one way that you can ensure that by just setting that region. I can then just type in the name of my customer and then hit the create organization button. That's going to go and just take a couple of seconds. It'll go and get that customer organization created. And then what I can do is I can go and get set up really quickly with a LimaCharlie template. You can configure things manually if you want to, but templates really help you hit the ground running. So we offer a bunch that are pre-built. So we have them available on our GitHub repo. We'll be sharing links out to this with you after the session is over, so you don't have to copy down any URLs that you see here. But we've got one that we've put together specifically for this webinar as well that is tailored towards incident response. So I'm just going to go and grab that one here. All that I need to do is copy this template, and then I'll come back into LimaCharlie and then go over to the template section and then paste it in. As soon as I hit apply, that's going to go and get all of the stuff configured inside of my system. I'll show you what that actually ends up doing. So once I go and set up this particular template, it goes and sets up a bunch of different add-ons that we have. One of those add-ons is the Sigma service. So Sigma is an open source repository of different kinds of detection rules that will apply automatically against your LimaCharlie organization. So as you have telemetry coming through, it runs through our detection and response engine. And then these are the rules, these are the signatures that are going to be applied. And it's going to look for any anomalies and surface those to you in our detection section. And I'll show you that in a moment. The other things that it's going to do is it's going to go and set up some artifact collection rules for you. So because I'm coming into an incident fresh, I've never had any data from this organization before, I can actually go and grab historical events from disk. So one of those types is going to be Windows event logs. So Windows event logs can be really handy to come in and show you different kinds of data that has been happening on an endpoint in particular. So LimaCharlie gives you two different ways of getting that data in. One is through what we call our real-time Windows event logs, and the other is through historical event logs that are going to be on disk. So I'll take a quick look at what those look like here. You can see those rules. I've got them set up in a couple of different ways. So these are the historical ones from disk. Again, coming into an IR, really handy to be able to just grab any of the logs that you want from disk. These are particular to Windows event logs, but our artifact collection rules actually let you grab anything that you want. So you can see I've even got a couple of others that are set up here. So for Mac OS systems, I can grab all of their system logs. I can also grab, from Linux systems as well, and all other kinds of telemetry data that you want to bring in. That is outside of what the LimaCharlie agent will natively bring in. We can also configure these to say how long you want to retain that data for. Again, for compliance reasons, if you want to retain that data for, whether it's 30, 60, 90 days, or even a full year, you can absolutely do that just by setting this value. So again, as a best practice, I'm going to say for our real-time Windows event logs, by default, we'll automatically keep those for you for a full year. That's one of the great advantages you'll have with LimaCharlie. We don't skimp out on data retention. It is really important when you're, going through and wanting to take a look at historical data to be able to pull all that stuff in. The artifact collection system can process different kinds of data. So far we've been looking at different kinds of logs, but in addition to these Windows event logs and system logs, we can bring in plain text log files, Windows prefetch files, Apple binaryplists, even packet captures. All sorts of stuff can come in, and that'll automatically be processed by the system. Now that I've got some of the basic configuration done, I'm essentially going to go and start getting all of my endpoints online. I'll just head over to the sensors section, and I can do it in a couple of different ways. I can, of course, add each sensor one by one individually. Not going to really work well with a very large fleet, which is why we've made it super easy for you to use pretty much any kind of RMM or mass deployment tool that you've already got. So whether you're using, SCCM, Jamf, ConnectWise, or any other kind of mass deployment tool, you can get set up with LimaCharlie to do that. If you've never used the platform before, we have this easy to use one-step wizard where you can just walk through, you choose the kind of platform that you want, you choose an installation key. If you're not familiar with the concept of installation keys, it will let you go and essentially have an endpoint know which organization it needs to be tied to. You can choose the kind of executable that you want, and then we give you a single command to go and run. To do this at scale, you can just go over to the install sensors section. This is where you can set up different kinds of installation keys, get access to all of our downloads. So, whether you're running on Windows, Mac OS, Linux, even Chrome OS, we give you links to all of those right here. So if you want to do mass deployments, you can grab the executables, download them, stage them, deploy them however you normally would. And then we give you even just the single command that you can use to execute as a script on each of the endpoints. So I'm going to just talk to you a little bit for a moment around our platform support. So obviously you can see we've got a bunch of different platforms here. One of the other pieces that folks a lot of times don't know about is the broad base of version support that we offer as well. So whether you've got really old versions of Windows or Mac OS or Linux, or even the latest and greatest, we support all of it. We're specifically not platform dependent or not Linux distribution dependent, so you don't have to worry about the flavor of Linux that you're using. We also offer Docker support for those that are interested in more server environments and getting set up there. So I'm going to fast forward. I've got a bunch of endpoints now online. I've got telemetry flowing in. I'm going to switch over from the basic setup to the more interesting end of things. And this is where I'm going to start investigating and essentially doing a little bit of hunting. So without having anything else configured other than the default rules that I'd applied based on the template, I can start seeing what has already come into my detection section. Inside of here, you're going to see what has come through from based on Sigma rules. And you can see all sorts of activities been happening over the last little while. So in particular, like the very first thing I notice here is there's all sorts of detections that are coming through, and they're actually all related to a single source. So the source in this case is related to a single endpoint. If I want to dig into it, I can simply click on that endpoint, and I can view a little bit of detail around it. I'll give you a quick tip. As soon as you're getting started with an investigation, before doing anything else and clicking in to get more detail, I'm just going to go and click this one button, which is Sweep Sensor. That's going to kick off a job in the background. This utilizes the LimaCharlie responder service. It is like having your own personal assistant do all the prep work for you, so that you can essentially focus all of your time on the important areas right away and not have to dig through all sorts of information that might just be noise. What this actually does behind the scenes is on the dashboard, it's going to show a new job that's being kicked off. So it goes and runs on this particular endpoint. It's essentially a set of scripts that are going to go and pull out key information that might be useful for you that it essentially wants to highlight and say, these might be suspicious and warrant further investigation. It can take a little while to run, so I'll show you one that I ran a little bit earlier. So on that endpoint, it'll pull in things like unsigned binary code. It can even highlight things like hidden modules and even various indicators of compromise. So whether it's hashes or file paths, all those kinds of things. But it'll produce this report. You can get this report, take a look at it, whether you want to browse or dig into anything that's individually, of interest to you. So for me, I'm just going to dig into one of these things. Well, this guy right here seems kind of suspicious, right? I did not expect this executable evil.exe to exist, especially considering that it's unsigned. I want to dig in. So a couple of things that I can do at this point. I'm just going to go and close out of here. Because my customer told me that all sorts of weird stuff seems to be happening inside of their environment, I want to know how many other endpoints might be impacted here. I can just do a very quick search right from the dashboard. So I saw that executable was evil.exe. I'm just going to run this quick search. This search is going to go and run against all of the endpoints that I brought in, all of the telemetry that's come in so far, and it's going to spit out a report of what it has seen. So it's identified that particular file. It's seen it today on a single endpoint, and in the past week, it's seen it on 2. I can see exactly which ones by clicking on the View Locations button. It's going to go and pull up a report that's going to show me the first time that it was seen, the last time that it was seen, and on exactly which ones. So I want to dig into the first time that it was seen on this particular endpoint, because that was the first time it's ever seen in this organization, right? This was the first box that was hit, and that's when it was that's when it popped in. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. So this takes us over to the timeline view. The timeline's really handy to browse events in context. So I can see sort of what had happened when in sequence and be able to trace things back. So here's evil.exe. It's a new process that had started. And I can pull back and see what exactly might have happened. So here's where it originally came from. So I can see from here, well, guess what? Explorer is the one that had brought it in. So probably a download that somebody had started. I can then go and see, what else that this particular process has done. If I wanted to go even further on this one, I can go and take a look at the existing processes that are going on the endpoint. In addition to being able to see processes, I can see file system information and network information from an endpoint, and this information is pulled in real time. So it's going to go and gather all of the network events that are happening, whether there are processes that are listening or talking on the network. You can take a look at those. And I can even go in here and see what is happening live on an endpoint. So if there's any activity happening, it'll start pulling in all that information. As another quick bit of information, if you haven't already looked at tagging inside of LimaCharlie, it's definitely a pro user feature. It lets you kick off a bunch of automations. We're going to go through some of that in just a little bit. But I'll show you in the in this Explorer view here, the different kind of timeline entries that you can see. Another quick tip is if you want to see what had happened after a particular event, you can choose to route the graph. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can see everything else that had happened here. It's just a nice, quick visual way of seeing what's going on. All right, so I've identified a bad executable, seems problematic. I just happen to know that that particular executable has been in the news lately, right? Evil.exe, Microsoft put out an announcement, and they've told me that one's bad, and they've even given me a patch to go and apply to protect all my endpoints. I can go and deal with this in a couple of different ways. So if they've given me a patch, LimaCharlie actually gives you a way to deploy that particular patch over all of your endpoints. We do that using a system called payloads. So our payload system is where you can go and upload any executables that you've got, or scripts, bash files, PowerShell, all sorts of different things that you want to go and stage inside of LimaCharlie, deploy out to your endpoints, whether it's individually one by one or at scale across the entire fleet, and have that run and execute. So in my case, I'll show you an example of what that might look like. I'm going to do this one manually to start off with. I can dig into the detail and go over to here. into the sensor details and over to the console. I can use all sorts of commands in this console here, but I'm going to start off by using the run command. And because I know I want to use a payload, I'm just going to type in payload name. I've already uploaded a payload. In this case, I'm just going to use a sysinternals tool just for this example. You can see I can pass along arguments and do all sorts of other things with it. I'm going to run that. What that is doing is it's going and grabbing that payload from the LimaCharlie cloud, deploying it off to the endpoint, and then giving me back the results. So again, if I had a remediation script or a payload to run, that would come back and give me a success result, or if it was a failure, it would come and let me know. As a professional, you're not necessarily always looking for the simplest tools out there, right? While simple is good, there are times where you definitely need more powerful tools. And these are tools that you can actually deliver all the things that you need to do. And that's what really LimaCharlie is really good at. So I'd say it's worth learning. It does take a little bit of time to figure out all the different areas of the product. And I am just really touching the surface of a lot of these things right now. So while I know that a lot of antivirus providers are eventually going to go and come out and deal with evil.exe, so I won't have to deal with it again, in the short term, all of my other endpoints might be at risk. So one of the things that I can do is I can set up a detection and response rule. These rules will let me go and look for particular kinds of activity that happens and then take remediation action. It can take a little bit of time to learn how to write a rule. Don't let that scare you away. It's absolutely worth it to go and do it. And we have actually made it much easier for you to get started. So one of the ways you can do that is by going over to the timeline view, looking for something that you know is suspicious that you want to stop. So in that case, I found evil.exe before. I can now just click on the Start DNR Rule button. So this is one of our newer features. It will go and pre-populate the detect portion of this rule. I can then go modify it however I want to. In this case, it's going to go and find a particular process with a particular name, and then I can choose what I want to do with it. So whether I want to have it, send me a pager duty alert, whether I want to automatically go and kill the process, if it should isolate that endpoint on the network, I can perform all of those different kinds of actions. We've got a full list of those actions in our documentation, so I encourage you to check that out. Click that View Docs button, and you can see that full list here. If you run into any issues getting any of these rules set up, there are a couple of different things you can do. One is we have a rules repo on GitHub with a bunch of different examples. Like our templates repo, we make that publicly available so you can go take a look at that, reference it, and just essentially copy and paste, right? Modify it based on whatever you need. If you're trying to create something a little bit more custom, never hesitate to reach out to us on our community Slack. So you can go over to slack.limacharlie.io, ask us a quick question there. So whether it's another member of our community that's going to answer or one of our team members, we'll be happy to get you set up inside of there. So I've mentioned a couple of different kinds of actions that you can take, whether it's isolating an endpoint, killing a process. You can even do things like tagging a sensor. So I mentioned before a pro tip around tagging. If you haven't used tagging before, it is something that is really powerful. You can use tagging for a lot of different things. In some cases, you'll want to use it for asset classification. So, whether you want to segment your virtual machines from your actual servers, you can just apply tags to very quickly at a glance see what those are. You can also use tags to perform powerful automations. So in my case here, I saw this endpoint and I know it's suspicious. So I can apply this tag. While it's nice for me to see visually here, hey, I know that one's suspicious, I can also have automated actions take place because that tag exists. I can have specific rules that are set up and other kinds of actions that take place based on a tag. So I had set up in advance an exfil control rule called suspicious. So when there is an asset that is tagged with suspicious, it's going to start collecting additional bits of telemetry, which are going to be really helpful for me to go and perform an investigation. So things like I want to see every single file delete and every single file that's been modified. Because these are typically heavy operations that you don't want to be capturing all the time, when you tag something with suspicious, it'll start capturing that additional information only for those endpoints that you designate, so that you're not adding additional load to that endpoint. You can then start taking a look at all of that data right inside of the timeline. It'll be captured just like absolutely everything else. And you can just choose the various kinds of events you want to see from this event type list. The other kinds of things that you might want to set up are file integrity and registry monitoring rules. In the template that I've already provided, you can take a look and see I've got a couple that I've already included by default, including monitoring for changes to Windows boot files, macOS keychains, the SSH keys on Linux boxes, but these are totally configurable by you. You can see it's a fairly simple structure. You go and specify the file paths, either the exact file paths, or you can specify wildcards in here as well. So if you want to monitor whole directories, you're able to do that too. You'll start seeing those show up based on rules that you set up. So I can set up a file integrity monitoring rule for specific kinds of, if I want to be notified as soon as an SSH key on a Linux box gets updated for the root user, because I don't ever expect that to change. I can have that show up inside of my detection section. It's a quick way for me to go and, figure out what's been happening inside of an organization. So I told you I'd mentioned a couple of business opportunities to consider. So one thing that we see from a lot of folks that are in the IR space is when they're done with an incident, they may want to try and convert their customer over to be more of a managed customer as well, if they have an MDR practice that they typically run. In some of those cases, customers will decline the MDR offer primarily due to cost, right? They weren't expecting this incident to happen to begin with. They typically hadn't been focused on security. So when they now think about moving forward a monthly cost for MDR that is relatively expensive might not be in the cards for them. One of the newest offerings that we've got here at LimaCharlie, it allows you to offer an extremely budget-friendly way of getting folks on board and growing them over time. It lets you sort of ensure that you're able to leave the sensors installed on all their endpoints so that you are their first call when another incident comes up. It saves you the onboarding time and lets you immediately get going and performing an investigation. It's extremely low cost because it is billed on pure usage. And when that customer is not in the middle of an incident, there's not really any usage that's happening. So we're talking pennies per month per endpoint. So again, it's an extremely budget-friendly way to get going with customers. We've got templates that are set up inside of our GitHub repo that show you exactly how to do that. In fact, we also have got a webinar that we run specifically on having sleeper agents set up on endpoints so you can get up and running very quickly with any of your IR customers. And as a quick side note, because we're looking at templates here, while you can use any of the custom pre-built ones that we've got, you're also able to go and set up your own templates. It lets you really, really quickly get set up for every new customer that you have going so that you don't have to go and click a bunch of different times inside to get configured. Of course, if you build your own rule sets, you can also get those set up inside of your templates as well. All right, I'll take a look and see if we've had any questions come through so far. Looks like we've had a couple. So I see someone saying, okay, so you showed us the Sigma rules, but I pay for my own threat feeds. Can I bring those into LimaCharlie? Thankfully, yeah, you absolutely can. So we've got a couple of different ways that you can bring in threat feeds. So not only do we provide a bunch on our marketplace, if you have your own that you already pay for, you can use our lookups functionality for that. You can actually create your own lookups right from here. You just create another add-on and you choose a lookup. And you can specify that here. And we've got full documentation on how to get lookup set up. And I'd suggest you go over to slack.limacharlie.io and we can walk you through the exact process to do that. And once you have those come through, any of the detection and response rules that we have can be set to fire based on those as well. I see someone's asked about getting firewall data into LimaCharlie. So, yep, you can also get, whether it's from a standard desktop machine, server, virtual machine, you can get all of that data in from other devices as well. You can get data in a couple of different ways. So if you have a lot of firewalls will output to syslog, we do offer syslog adapters. So you can get those set up, and that will pull in that information in real time. It'll show up just like all these other sensors inside of LimaCharlie. It'll just be another sensor, which gives you the full capability to just click in and then go over and view data inside the timeline, and then also to go and have the same set of rules that are part of our detection and response rules kick off as well. Someone is asking, how can I reduce the noise from Windows event logs? Because there's a lot of data coming through. Yeah, we give you a couple of different ways of doing that, actually. So we've built our artifact collection system to be really, really flexible. So you'd seen where I had specified in these Windows event logs, I've just got a star on the end of these. It's bringing in absolutely everything. These ones at the bottom here, I actually have customized. I'm only bringing in very specific events. I can actually specify the exact event ID if I wanted to, which I've done in these cases, right? So I'm also bringing in, I happen to have Sysmon on set up on some of these machines, and I wanted to bring in these particular Sysmon events because I know I'm interested in taking care of those. So that's one way that you can reduce noise when you just don't have all that other data come through. The other element actually I'll mention around that is with our real-time event logs, you can do this kind of great filtering. From a compliance perspective, some folks do also have a need of still being able to retain all the other data. And that's exactly why I've got both sets coming in, right? I've got my real-time event logs as well as my events on disk. The ones on disk, again, for compliance, you've got 30 days of retention. You can change that number to whatever you would like for whatever your compliance needs are, and we'll retain all that data for you. Okay, I see someone's asking a question about how multiple folks from a team can work together and handle an incident. So a couple different things come into play there. First is, I'm just going to talk briefly about our role-based access control. So because LimaCharlie is a true multi-tenant kind of system, you can easily go and set up different kinds of permissions based on a user that you want to configure, right? So I can come in here and on an individual organization by organization basis, I can go and tweak the permissions. We've got different role templates that we set up by default. We also give you the ability to individually go and customize this even further. For a lot of IR folks, what we'll tell you to do, though, is to go and configure what we call groups. So with groups, you can go and set up different kinds of groups for the different folks that you've got on your team. You can set up all of your team members. You can specify exactly which organizations they have access to, and then the permissions that they should have. Permissions are additive. So if just because I've got someone that's in the analyst group that maybe has a limited set of permissions, I might also want to, on occasion, give them, maybe it's break glass kind of access to go and deploy code out to an endpoint or deploy a payload out to an endpoint. So I can have an additive rule that's on top of that. They might need to go get manager permission, and then they can be approved to have that added in. The other element that comes into play when you want to work collaboratively is you can use our LimaCharlie comms functionality. So comms is a way to allow a lot of folks on your team to work together on an incident. So we will automatically go and create what we call a room inside of LimaCharlie. And when you take a look at a room, I can have multiple people that are inside of here. So in this case, it's just me. I'm the only member of this room right now. As soon as I have other members from my team join, they'll show up in this members list. I can also go and assign this room to a particular person. So I'll see all of my team members show up in this list. I can choose who it is that is responsible for dealing with this particular incident. They'll not only be named, but they can also then, be very collaborative in here. So we provide all sorts of data that's in line. We've got machine data that's coming in, right? Detections as they come through are showing up in line. We also let you go and have collaboration directly in here. So whether I'm typing a message, all of this is a good way to keep track of what's happening inside of, during an incident. So people can see when they want to come back after the fact, they can see the play-by-play, and they can even use this as a playbook. So that's another way that we see folks sort of coordinate during an incident and keep on the same page. So it's just one of the tools that we've got. Okay, the next question is, can I use a DNR rule based on specific detection to automatically drop a payload on a device? Yep, absolutely. So any of the actions that you've seen me take so far, pretty much absolutely everything can be automated. So our detection and response rules engine is super powerful. Just gonna go back over here and show you sort of what that looks like. I'll see if I have a pre-built example with one of those, but essentially, from here, it's just a different kind of action that you can take. So in this case, not only am I reporting this as a detection, I'm also going and isolating this particular endpoint on the network. The other things that I could do, like in that evil.exe example, I could go and I'm performing a task and I'm using the deny tree command. So that's going to go and kill the process and all of its descendants. I can also then go and deploy a payload to go and deal with the remediation. So it's going to go and deploy the patch after to make sure that the the box doesn't get reinfected, kind of thing. Can a DNR rule trigger another rule? Depending on what you mean by that exactly. So DNR rules kick off. They will go and fire based on what is seen from an event that comes through. If you're meaning more, can I take different kinds of action and then chain those actions? You absolutely can. So in one of these examples here, not sure, I can essentially add a tag. So in that example where I showed you before, where I had a tag that I created that was called suspicious, right? I would go and, in fact, I added that here. I'm automatically tagging this particular endpoint with the tag suspicious, and I've even given it a time to live. It's doing it for 5 minutes. So this is number of seconds it's going to do it for. As soon as that tag of suspicious is on, it goes and kicks through all the other automation that I have. So this other exfil rule that I've got that starts capturing additional data, that's going to be kicking in. So now these file delete and file modify events are coming in. I can then have another DNR rule that's based on these new events that weren't coming in before. And if we know it's then going and modifying a particular file that I had set up inside of my file integrity and registry monitoring, it will then go and fire a different DNR rule. So lots of different ways that you can do that. Okay, let's see. So it looks like there are a bunch of other questions are coming through. So if I've built in Sigma, so you have built-in Sigma rules with custom actions. So we are actually enhancing the way that we're handling Sigma rules right now. So you'll be able to do a bunch more customization with them. For right now, if you have a custom rule that's set up, you can totally customize the kind of response that you take. For a Sigma rule that comes in, if you've already had that rule fire, you can duplicate that rule and type in whichever custom response actions that you want to take with that. So that's one option for you. We're going to be bringing in a couple more over the next coming months. I'd love to hear some more specifics around that in particular. If you're on our community Slack, feel free to shoot me a quick message there and we can get into sort of the nitty gritty of what we're going to be working on next, just to make sure it covers what you're looking for. So I know we are a little bit over time here. Appreciate everyone coming through and sticking it out on the webinar. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. If you have any other questions, again, join our community Slack at slack.limacharlie.io. Let us know what other questions you've got, and we'll be happy to answer them there. Thanks again for joining, and enjoy using LimaCharlie. Bye.